You mentioned calcium and vitamin D a couple of times there. What's going on with that? How much of a role does diet play in all of this?
Dietary intake, a general, dietary pattern matters a lot in this context, and specifically looking at calcium and vitamin D, there are some important aspects to consider. So just in general, kind of like we mentioned, sufficient calcium intakes are absolutely necessary for the acquisition of peak bone mass in development. So eating enough calcium, drinking enough calcium in the form of milk, et cetera, is critical, as actually the skeleton contains 99% of the body's calcium stores. Oh, wow. So again, as soon as you were to, become deficient in what you're consuming, either just by intake or some other health issue, that's where that, again, resorption process comes into play. The blood and other functions in the body need that calcium, and you're pulling it ultimately from the largest reservoir that's found. And
you're just not going to know. It's not like you feel it internally that, oh, now I'm pulling from my bones. It just happens without you thinking about it.
Exactly. And, again, thankfully our body has these feedback mechanisms in place. But yes, this is something that is going on under the hood, under your conscious awareness. Okay. So in general, again, I think that just speaks to the importance of diet here. In general, what's recommended is about 1,000 milligrams a day of calcium in those 19 to 70 years old. And in women,
19 to 70.
So
nearly everybody. Okay.
And there might be some varying recommendations depending on the organization that you're looking at. In general, about 1,000 milligrams a day is recommended in men 19 to 50. Once you are greater than 70, or you're greater than that cut point, it jumps up to about 1,200 milligrams per day. Okay. And then the general recommendation for women is 19 to 70, or 19 and beyond, basically, is 1,200 milligrams per day.
Okay. So for women, it's just 1,200 all the way through. For men, it's 1,000 until about 50, maybe up to 70. Then it goes up.
Exactly.
Got it.
Exactly. Now, we'll talk a little bit about supplemental calcium, but in general, there's some evidence that supplemental intake above 1,200 to 1,500 per day can actually increase the risk for the individual of developing kidney stones in kind of specific at risk. Again, the only reason I mention that is this is not something you just want to be taking 6 big calcium tablets every day.
You can overdo it.
You can overdo it for sure. Again, because of that complex interplay with calcium, the bone, the blood, parathyroid, etc.
Makes sense. So your bones might be thick, but you'll have kidney stones, and that's awful. So
exactly.
Okay. Especially just a few. This is a lot of the population we've already discussed, but I just want to mention who should supplement. Yeah, that is controversial. We don't have all those answers for you, but in terms of who should, with the details again are a little controversial. But glucocorticoid use, again, especially oral, but also inhaled, perimenopause, family history. Obviously, if you've been diagnosed with osteopenia. But then the other ones are risk factors: sedentary lifestyle, chronic heavy alcohol use, smoking, even excessive caffeine intake can be, contributing factor.
Wow.
So when you look at, again, when you're evaluating just the overall picture, you check some of these boxes, but no, should a 35-year-old woman with none of these risk factors just start taking calcium because they're worried about, they only check maybe the family history box? No. So it's a combination of all these things.
Okay. All right. Fascinating. All right.
Yeah. And that's a good point. As long as you're staying within the bounds of kind of what's recommended there, you're hard pressed to see any major issues. The one caveat would be just to be mindful of, or maybe start to pay a little more attention to the amounts or the types of foods that you're eating that might be rich in calcium, because that'll affect obviously maybe how much you're supplementing with. And that's tricky because not everybody is weighing their servings. Not everything is a nice 8-ounce container of yogurt or an 8-ounce glass of milk. You're eating cheese here and there, or you have a scoop of cottage cheese or whatever. I know that that's difficult, but some of those calcium rich foods are some of the obvious ones that we probably all know from elementary school. Good old milk, almond and soy milk, yogurt, cheese, And of course, fortified foods and juices are going to be rich in, they're fortified with calcium and vitamin D.
Got it.
And then tofu is another actually fairly rich source of calcium. And so in general, if you were to drink an 8-ounce glass of milk, the estimated calcium per serving is 300 milligrams. So right there, if you have a couple glasses of milk, almond milk has even more on average, 450 milligrams.
That's a lot
in an
more.
8-ounce glass. So not as we allude to with when we're talking about calorie counts and, protein amounts and all those sorts of things.
Sure.
I know it's not an attractive thing to do is, unless you're Tyler, is measure out your every meal. I've never seen someone stick with their dietary tracking quite as long as Tyler, which is impressive. It
I have
can
to
be done.
sit next to you.
It can
Are
be
you
done.
kidding me?
But no, just, as Joey mentioned, there's quite a large list of those who would potentially be candidates for some additional safe supplementation. Just first pay attention to what you're consuming in your diet.
Right.
And if you have more questions about that sort of stuff and, you're unfamiliar with food labels and it's probably it's probably better served as a targeted question.
Sure.
But just pay attention.
Yeah. Okay. So that's calcium. Is there, vitamin D I know is a part of this. How is that different?
Yeah. They're often a tag team duo.
Yeah.
I would say in this context.
Why is that? Just as an aside.
Tag team. What's a famous tag team? Go ahead. I know you got one in it.
The Rockers.
Yeah.
Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty.
Oh, we've descended to pro wrestling.
Tag team.
Wrestling's just been hot. Old wrestling has been hot on my mind. So,
All right. So which one is, the Rockers, vitamin D and calcium, tag team.
Shawn Michaels is the vitamin D. He's a little more controversial.
Clearly. Why?
New supplement line coming. Get it at AskJoeDiMatteo.com.
Oh my
The
gosh.
Rockers.
Why are these two, why are they such a tag team? Why do they go together?
So
Calcium is what builds your bones.
Right.
What does vitamin D do?
we have entire classes, not entire classes, but entire segments of classes on how this feedback process occurs, how parathyroid plays a role, how your kidneys play a role, where the bone comes in. I mean, it's
complex.
It really is.
Okay.
It's fascinating. But for all intents and purposes here, vitamin D is facilitating calcium absorption necessary for mineralizing bone.
Okay. So vitamin D tells the body, hey, absorb this.
Mm-hmm. And so there's even some gray area with, how much is needed to facilitate the absorption. Does everybody need to take vitamin D if they're taking calcium? Some of those questions I'm not super confident in answering, to be honest, but in general, the biggest thing to pay attention to with respect to vitamin D is if you are somebody who has some of these risk factors, or you already know you have osteoporosis, or you've had a history of, non-traumatic fractures and such. I'm sure you've had a vitamin D level drawn, and I'm sure this is, already being addressed, but knowing the baseline level of vitamin D will often dictate, even if you're osteoporotic, that level of vitamin D will dictate whether or not you need to supplement in larger amounts of vitamin D. And so in general, there's depending on where you look, 600 to 800 to 1,000 units of vitamin D is safe, up to 4,000, 5,000, little controversial.
Sure.
But in general, you can take some supplemental vitamin D on a daily basis relatively safely. But knowing that baseline level is going to be critical just as a general recommendation.
So knowing the baseline determines how much and if you even need to be supplementing or considering it.
Yes, because again, just back to kind of the physiology or the pathophysiology, if you are definitely deficient in vitamin D, that could certainly be contributing to the lack of mineralization that's occurring at the level of the bone. So by addressing that can certainly help to, I would say, ramp things up.
So even if you drink, 5 big glasses of milk a day, if you're not getting enough vitamin D, then the calcium is irrelevant.
Exactly.
To some extent. Okay.
Exactly. And there's still lies some, controversy there as well. But again, just sort of the the downsides of doing some supplemental D like that is not going to be the end of the world. And
Got it.
and ultimately, if you were to look at that case specifically, you would probably end up doing what is almost like these loading doses of vitamin D.
Mhm.
So you do 50,000 units a week for a certain amount of time, and then they back you to essentially build that reservoir. And then eventually they'll back you down to 1,000 units a day or 2,000 units a day based upon where you sit. But that's a good example. That's probably a pretty classic case.
Makes sense. That's really cool.
And I'm sure Joey might have more to add there as well. I know I alluded to knowing that vitamin D level, and that vitamin D level will depend on the units that you're looking at. As Joey and I discussed, you'll see it in nanomoles per liter. You'll see it in nanograms per liter. And they're similar, generally similar numbers. So it helps to clear that up. So in general, the normal range for 25 hydroxy vitamin D is 20 to 50 nanograms per milliliter. And in, some places will recommend staying above 30 if you're in the situation of osteopenia, osteoporosis. There was one paper that looked at adding additional vitamin D to those who were not osteoporotic or osteopenic. The average level of 25 hydroxy vitamin D in that study was 27, and adding about 2,000 units a day of vitamin D supplementally didn't add a ton of benefit as far as bone health or bone measures, so to speak. So it's very context dependent on the demographic, the level. It's not, if you're by optimizing your vitamin D level, if it's already close to normal or normal, I don't know how much, again, that's going to do for bone health and bone measures, so to speak. You or I presumably having healthy bones at this point, not having a bunch of the risk factors for osteoporosis, boosting our 25-OHD level substantially isn't going to necessarily improve our bone health at all because we're already healthy that way, correct? Yeah, and you might be taking it for other reasons. Right. But I think in this context, we can agree there. Makes sense.
Yeah, and I think too, just kind of back to the controversy of the level. Yeah. Because to me, whenever you are taking, in the supplement world, something where the level is measured, proof's kind of in the pudding. If you decide to take 10,000 a day and your level is low normal or normal, okay. It's to me, it's really about the level, as long as you're keeping up on that. And then in terms of the controversy, we know you want to be over 20, right? That's accepted. And then on the other spectrum, excess vitamin D level is defined as over 100. Oh, wow. So maybe you read a study or you have a practitioner that's swearing at 50 or 70. You've got to be at 50 or 70. My doctor's okay at 30. Doesn't have to be the controversy that it is because you're not at the upper level. Right. Vitamin D intoxication, or actually hypervitaminosis D, is defined over 150. Wow. So if you're comfortable with somebody who's recommending you at 50 or 70, I really don't see the downside, given it's still how far you are away from the extreme. So are we giving you an exact answer of this is the new hot level that we recommend? I personally, I guess I'm not doing that, but we know the minimum and we know what's definitely too high. Somewhere in the middle, there's some gray. Yeah. And I think Dante said it earlier, the proof is in the results. Yes. If you're not getting the results you need, you might need more. Mm-hmm. Makes sense. And vitamin D is just you could bring it up in a million different contexts. And in general, for example, the person who's taking 10,000 units a day or 5,000 units a day, and it's kind of barely moving the needle for them. There are many instances where absorption is different or changed or altered in a negative way. So individuals with celiac disease, inflammatory bowel, those who have had bariatric surgery, also just the way that we absorb vitamin D in through the skin from the sun, right, changes based upon the demographic, the skin color, the pigmentation. So there's so much there. And then also just the idea that, vitamin D is often maybe reflective of the level, low, high, or whatever, reflective of a relic of other coexisting conditions. So that's the point, I think, of those kind of large ranges. Makes sense. It's tough, but you don't just
can't sit here and recommend you run to your doctor and demand a vitamin D just out of concern. You know, if you just have general, concerns.
Just because the number is X.
Yes. Yeah.
Don't freak out. Got it.